A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
Have you ever noticed that in almost every high-stakes disaster movie, there is that one character who sees the catastrophe coming while everyone else is celebrating? Usually, they are treated like a total pariah until the third act when everything hits the fan. Well, it turns out that being the person who ruins the mood might actually be one of the most bankable skills in the 2026 job market. Today's prompt from Daniel is about those institutional contrarians. Specifically, how people who have a knack for questioning the status quo can turn that into a high-value career. The devil's advocate isn't just a personality trait anymore. It is a high-value, under-leveraged professional asset that organizations are finally starting to pay for.
It is a fascinating pivot in organizational health. I am Herman Poppleberry, and I have been looking forward to this because the shift from seeing Dissent as a bug to seeing it as a feature is finally hitting the mainstream. We are moving away from the era of the yes man and into an era where being professionally difficult is a specialized service. In a world where AI-driven decision-making is moving at light speed, the risk of automated groupthink is higher than ever. Organizations are increasingly hiring for Dissent as a core risk mitigation strategy.
Daniel pointed us toward a specific jumping-off point that we mentioned briefly in a previous episode, the Israel Defense Forces and their formal Devil's Advocate unit. It is worth dissecting how a military culture, which you would think is all about hierarchy and following orders, decided they needed an entire department dedicated to telling the generals they are completely wrong.
It is called the Ephraim unit, though it is often referred to by the Aramaic term Ipja Mistra, which translates to the opposite side. It was established after the 1973 Yom Kippur War, and the history there is vital for anyone wanting to understand professional dissent. At that time, Israeli intelligence had all the raw data suggesting an imminent attack from Egypt and Syria, but they were blinded by what they called the conceptia, a fixed mental framework, that the neighboring states would not attack until they had certain air capabilities. Because everyone in the room agreed with the conceptia, contrary data was ignored or explained away.
The Agranad Commission, which investigated the massive failures of that war, concluded that groupthink is a terminal disease for intelligence agencies. They realize that when everyone thinks alike, no one is actually thinking. So, they created a unit whose sole job is to produce an alternative assessment. This isn't just a suggestion box, it is a structural requirement. If the main intelligence branch says there is a 10% chance of war, the Ephraim unit is legally mandated to write a report explaining why it is actually 80%.
And they are not just guessing or playing a character. They have access to the same raw data, the same satellite feeds, and the same signals intelligence as everyone else. They are just forced to interpret it through a lens of failure. This brings up a crucial distinction for our listeners. There is a massive difference between a contrarian who just likes the sound of their own voice, the person who is just asking questions to be annoying, and a professional red teamer who provides structural value. One is a personality flaw. The other is a rigorous analytical process.
So, if I'm someone who naturally spots the flaw in a plan, how do I formalize that? If I just walk into a meeting and say, this will never work, I am just being difficult and I will probably be the first person fired during a layoff. But how do we move from the theory of dissent to the practical application of these roles?
You have to use frameworks that make dissent safe for the rest of the team. The most effective entry-level drug for institutional dissent is the pre-mortem technique, popularized by psychologist Gary Klein. Instead of a post-mortem, where you look back at why a project failed after the money is gone, you gather the team at the very start. You say, imagine it is 1 year from now and this project has been a total disaster. Everyone is fired, the company is sued, and the product is a laughingstock. Now, tell me exactly why it happened.
I love that because it flips the social pressure. In a normal meeting, the pressure is to be a team player and support the boss's idea. In a pre-mortem, the pressure is to be the smartest person at identifying a potential disaster. You are not attacking anyone's current idea. You are participating in a creative hypothetical exercise. It turns the difficult person into a visionary who is protecting the team.
That is how you move from being a nuisance to being a risk architect. But let's talk about the mechanics of red teaming. In high-stakes tech environments, red teaming has moved beyond just cybersecurity. We looked at the methodology of this in episode 893, but since then, the scope has expanded into every facet of business. A professional red teamer doesn't just find bugs in code, they find bugs in logic, in marketing strategies, and in supply chains. They are looking to find the truth by trying to break the current consensus.
Why do organizations struggle so much to integrate these people, though? Even if you have an Ephraim unit, isn't there a natural human instinct to just tune out the person who is always bringing bad news?
There is a massive psychological cost to being the professional Cassandra. Even in the Ephraim unit, those officers have to be incredibly thick-skinned. You are essentially telling powerful people that their baby is ugly every single day. There is a high burnout rate because humans are social animals, and being the no person feels like social suicide. The most successful professional contrarians I have seen in 2026 are people who are incredibly collaborative in their delivery, even if their message is devastating. It is the velvet glove approach. You have to build massive amounts of social capital just to spend it all in one meeting where you tell the CEO their flagship project is a liability.
We're seeing this play out in AI safety and alignment right now. High-stakes tech firms are hiring red teamers whose entire job is to find ways to make AI models behave badly, to make them hallucinate, give out dangerous instructions, or show bias. They are looking for people who can think like a bad actor, a conspiracy theorist, or a malicious regulator. It is basically a white hat version of being a troll, using lateral thinking to shore up defenses.
This leads us directly into career pivots. If someone is sitting in a standard role right now, like a product manager or a quality assurance engineer, how do they pivot into this space? One natural move is from standard QA into failure mode analysis or reliability engineering. A standard QA person checks if software meets specifications. A failure mode analyst asks what happens if the user does something completely insane or if the infrastructure fails in an unanticipated way. They aren't checking if it works. They are checking how it breaks.
What about the humanities? You mentioned earlier that this is a rigorous analytical process. Does that mean you need a computer science degree?
Not necessarily. In fact, some of the best risk architects I know come from philosophy or law. If you have a background in philosophy, specifically logic and ethics, you are trained to look for fallacies and hidden assumptions. In a world where AI generates massive amounts of content and strategy, the human who can spot a logical fallacy or a hidden bias is incredibly valuable. I have seen people move from academic philosophy into roles like AI ethics auditor or trust and safety lead. They are essentially auditing the morality and logic of a company's automated systems.
I've also been hearing about the rise of the chief dissent officer. It sounds like a joke, but in decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, and companies with very flat structures, you almost need that role to prevent the hive mind from taking over. Without a boss to make the final call, these groups can spiral into endless agreement or endless bickering.
We are seeing that in governance models for large-scale decentralized projects, they will have a designated group, sometimes called a security council or a dissent bureau, that is actually incentivized to find flaws in proposals. If they find a critical flaw that the community missed, they get a bounty. It is a bug bounty program, but for corporate strategy. Even in traditional hierarchies, look at aerospace firms like Boeing. After the crises of the last few years, the value of someone who can stand up to a production schedule and say, "This is not safe," has never been higher. The market has realized that a yes-man culture is a multi-billion-dollar liability.
So, how do you actually sell this to a hiring manager? If I go into an interview and say, "I'm a contrarian who loves to tell people they're wrong," I'm going to be back on the sidewalk in 5 minutes.
You have to frame it as risk mitigation and cost saving. You do not say, "I am a contrarian." You say, "I specialize in identifying hidden failure modes before they become expensive liabilities." You cite the data. For example, A 2025 study by the Harvard Business Review found that teams with a designated devil's advocate showed a 22% increase in identifying critical project risks compared to control groups. You are not there to stop the project, you are there to make the final result more robust. You are the person who checks the parachute. You aren't trying to stop the jump, you are making sure they don't hit the ground at terminal velocity.
That is a great analogy. It reminds me of the Israeli paradox we talked about in episode 1362. Why is such a small country so dominant in tech? A lot of it comes down to dugri, which is the Hebrew word for straight talk. In many Israeli companies, it is expected that you will challenge your boss. This is a direct result of that military experience where a 20-year-old sergeant might have more on-the-ground information than a 40-year-old colonel. If that sergeant stays silent out of respect for hierarchy, people die. In tech, it means you find bugs faster and don't waste years building something nobody wants, just because the CEO liked the idea.
For the American listener, the career opportunity is being the person who can bridge that gap. You can be the consultant who comes in and says, your team is suffering from terminal agreement. You pay me to tell you the truth because I don't have to worry about office politics. But the real internal growth is in the role of the white hat policy analyst. Just like a white hat hacker looks for vulnerabilities in code, a white hat policy analyst looks for vulnerabilities in a company's strategy. They run simulations, pretending to be a competitor or a hostile regulator, looking for blind spots the executive team is too close to see.
This connects back to AI. As these systems start managing power grids, medical diagnostics, and financial markets, the cost of a single logical failure goes up exponentially. If you are an institutional contrarian, you are basically a human jailbreaker.
And we need that because AI, specifically large language models, are currently prone to a version of groupthink called sycophancy. They often try to please the user, agreeing with flawed premises because they are trained to be helpful. We need humans who are specifically trained not to be helpful in that way, but to be adversarial. AI alignment research needs people who can think of the edge cases that the AI hasn't been exposed to yet. If the AI says, this bridge design is perfect, we need the person who asks, what if the wind hits it at exactly 42 miles per hour while a resonance frequency is triggered by a passing train?
But what happens if an organization institutionalizes dissent and then just ignores it? You become a professional Cassandra. Always right, but never believed. That sounds like a recipe for a mental health crisis.
That is the danger. The Ephraim unit only works because the head of military intelligence is legally required to present their dissenting opinion to the cabinet alongside the majority view. It isn't just a nice-to-have report, it is a mandatory part of the decision-making record. If you are looking for a career in this, you have to vet the company as much as they vet you. Ask interviewers, what happens when I tell you the project should be canceled? Who sees my report? Does it go to the board or get buried by my supervisor? If there is no structural protection for dissent, you are just a target.
This also applies to finance. The people who made a killing during the housing bubble or the various crypto collapses were the ultimate institutional contrarians. They bet against the consensus and were right. Those people often come from non-traditional backgrounds. They aren't always the MBAs taught to follow standard models. They are the outsiders who noticed the numbers didn't add up. One of the best career pivots for a contrarian is into forensic accounting or short-selling research. You are literally paid to find the lie in the financial statements.
But you have to be better than the people you are criticizing. This is the part people forget. If you challenge the consensus, your work must be beyond reproach. You have to show you have considered all the arguments the other side is making and that you have a more robust explanation. It is a rigorous analytical discipline. It is not about being a jerk, it is about being a scout.
I love that term. It comes from Julia Galef's book, The Scout Mindset, which we should definitely recommend as a framework for this. A soldier's job is to defend a position, but a scout's job is to find out what is actually out there, even if the news is bad. The institutional contrarian is the ultimate scout. In a world where information bubbles are getting thicker, the scout is the only one who can see through the fog.
Companies are realizing that the most expensive thing they can own is a room full of people who all agree with each other. It is a hedge against reality, and reality always wins. If you want to be a professional scout, you have to handle the social aspect carefully. You make the problem the enemy, not the person. Instead of saying, your plan is flawed, you say, I am worried about this specific scenario. How does our plan handle it? You frame it as a collaborative effort to make the project bulletproof.
You also have to be the first person to admit when you are wrong. If you are a contrarian who is also humble and obsessed with the truth, people will eventually come to rely on you as a sanity check. You want to be the person people go to when they want to make sure they aren't crazy. You aren't broken. You just have a scout's eyes in a world full of soldiers.
And the market is finally catching up to that value. The key is to professionalize that impulse. Don't just be the person who says no. Be the person who shows why the answer might be no and what would have to change to make it a yes. It is about moving from being an obstructionist to being a filter. You want to filter out the bad ideas so the good ones can survive contact with reality.
We have covered a lot of ground, from the Ephraim unit to AI ethics. If you are that person who always sees the disaster coming, maybe it is time to turn it into a specialty. The world needs more scouts. As we move further into this decade with the complexity of AI, the need for institutionalized dissent is only going to grow. Machines will be great at executing the plan, but we will still need humans to ask if it is the right plan in the first place.
It is a duty. If you can see the flaw in the plan, you have a responsibility to speak up. But you have to learn the language of the organization to be heard. You have to translate your dissent into the language of risk, cost, and mission success.
Before we go, let's give some practical advice for the resume. Don't just list your skills. List the disasters you prevented. Frame your experience in terms of risk mitigation. Instead of saying you managed a project, say you conducted failure mode analysis that identified critical vulnerabilities before launch. Use real numbers. How much money did you save the company by spotting that flaw early? How many months of development time did you save by pivoting away from a dead end?
And remember the 3-question rule when challenging an assumption in a meeting. 1. What is the best evidence for the current view? 2. What evidence would be required to change that view? And 3. Is it possible that we are missing that evidence right now? It moves the conversation from an ego battle to an evidence-based discussion. It shows that you respect the process but are committed to the truth. Most people will respect that even if they don't like what you have to say in the moment.
If you're looking to sharpen those scout skills, definitely read The Scout Mindset by Julia Galef. And if you want to see how this works in practice, listen to episode 893 on red teaming for the tactical steps for breaking a plan. Episode 1362 on the Israeli tech scene also provides great context on why this mindset is a design choice in high-performing environments.
Well, this has been a great deep dive. I feel like I have a much better handle on why you were so annoying to argue with when we were kids, Korn. You were just an aspiring Ipcha Mistra officer.
Hey, I told you that building a treehouse out of old cardboard boxes was a bad idea. It held up for at least 20 minutes, but I saw the structural failure coming. Anyway, that is our show for today. Thanks to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, and to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the AI systems we use to research this show.
If you are a fellow institutional contrarian, we would love to hear from you. Find us at myweirdprompts.com for the full archive and all the ways to subscribe.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you are enjoying the show, consider leaving us a review. It helps us reach more people looking for their own weird career pivots.
Stay curious, keep questioning the status quo, and we will talk to you next time.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts.